Good evening. Good to see everybody this Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening. Glad you're here. Hope we had a good day. We're going to continue tonight talking about the Judges. We're going to be in Judges chapter 8 in just a moment. That's where we'll start. I'll begin with opening prayer tonight. And Lynn Pennington, will lead some prayer, please. We're going to have several scriptures. I'm not going to read every scripture, but they will be up on the board. Some of them I just comment on because we got a good little distance to go. I want to cover all this ground tonight, so we'll start with a different judge next week. But in Judges 8 and verse 30, we find this about Gideon. Gideon had 70 sons who were his own offspring, for he had many wives. And his concubine, who was in Shechem, also bore him a son, whose name is called Abimelech. Now Gideon, the son of Joash, died at a good old age, and was buried in the tomb of Joash his father in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. So Gideon's been a busy man. Here he is. He's got many wives. We don't know how many, but he has 70 sons. Those would be sons of his wives. And then he has a concubine who bears him a son. He may have had other concubines, but this one is what the Bible calls out. No, it doesn't give her name, but we know where she's from. So he's got several sons, and at least this one son by this concubine. And of course, at old age, he dies. And as he dies here, a new chapter in Israel is going to take place. Now, the son's name here is Abimelech. That's what the mother names him. And the meaning of that name is father of a king. Even though he can't be a king, because servants or concubines, their offsprings cannot be kings. They had to come from an actual bloodline themselves, but yet she's got something in mind. She's got a plan of what she's going to do here. So again, she wants her son to be a king, and with time, hopefully he will be. So therefore now Gideon is dead, and the next chapter happens. Chapter 8, 34 and 35. Thus the children of Israel did not remember the Lord their God, who had delivered them from the hands of all their enemies on every side. Nor did they show kindness to the house of Jerubbaal, Gideon, in accordance with the good he had done for Israel. So Israel, after Gideon dies, they go back to their old ways that they always did. When these good judges would die off, well, then they would go back to worshiping these idols, and they get in trouble, and God will send another judge in. Well, that's what's happened here. Except this time, this new generation has turned against the family of Gideon. Of all that Gideon had done for them, to deliver them and help them, well, they have turned against the family of Gideon, and that's not good. They're not showing respect to the family. And at one point, remember last week, they wanted to make Gideon a king because of his leadership, and Gideon turned them down. Well, that was one generation. This new generation is coming in. Now they have turned against the family there of Gideon. And that happens. It also happens, sad to say, sometimes it happens in the church. And what I mean by that, Sometimes you have individuals, they'll become a Christian, and they're a Christian every how long they are, and for whatever reason, they depart, and they leave the church. And it may be that they'll join a denominational church. Sometimes they'll do that. Sometimes they won't do anything. But sometimes these individuals will turn on the very people that they once were brethren with, went to church with, and they'll turn on them. They'll begin to say some pretty mean things about the church itself or about some of the brethren there. I've heard them say it. I've been there trying to convince them, trying to get them to turn around, and they'll say some mean things. And that's sad that they will do that. But yet, it happens. It happened here in the case of Gideon. These individuals turn against him, at least against his family, and just sort of forgot about him and the blessings he gave to them. Now, chapter 9 of Judges is where a plot begins to set Abimelech up as king, verses 1 and 2. Abimelech is from the town of Shechem. That's where his mother was from. Now, Gideon was from the town of Ophrah, and therefore that's where his family was. But Abimelech, at least his mother, is from Shechem, and he's with his mother, and she's wanting to make him king, so she has family members there. I'm sure she has other brothers and sisters and maybe other children, who knows. So this plot begins with her thinking, let's get everybody on my son's side. This is his hometown. Everybody knows him. And let's see if we can make him king. So this point comes about, and Abimelech begins to say to the people, which one would you rather have? Would you rather have me as your king or the 70 sons of Gideon? I'm flesh and blood here. That's what it says in verse 2. I'm flesh and blood. You know me. You don't know these other guys. Who do you want to be your king? Well, they began to reason. And in verse 3, that's where they said, well, he's our brother. And sure enough, why do we want to have these strangers, the sons of Gideon, to be our king? So they say, let's make him king. He'll be our king. And in verse 4, these people of Shechem, they go to this temple, Baal Berith, which is a pagan temple. They had one there. It wouldn't have been on, Gideon wouldn't have approved of this, but they had this temple. And they take money from the temple, 70 shekels, and they give it to Abimelech. He's now their king. And they give it to him. And he goes off and hires some, as it says there, worthless, reckless men. He's going to hire them. He has hired them. Hoodlums, we might call them. Mobs or whatever, scoundrels, whatever name you want to use. He hires them. And guess what the first thing he wants them to do? In verse 5, these scoundrels, they go to Ophrah, where the 70 sons of Gideon live, and they kill 99% of them. They kill 69 of them out of 70. One is left. Jerubbaal, he hid himself. They couldn't find him. But here Abimelech is wiping out the entire lineage of Gideon. And that's the way these kings would do, back in the biblical times, sometimes of both of Israel and also these other nations. When you want to be king, you want to make sure nobody would intrude upon your kingship. So you wipe out all these others. Well, he thought he did a good job, except there's one that's left. And then in chapter 9 and verse 6, and all the men of Shechem, that's these hoodlums, gathered together, all of Beth Millo, and they went and made Abimelech king beside the terebinth tree at the pillar that was in Shechem. So they want to make him king, and they did. This terebinth tree it was a monument there, a pillar, we might say, Joshua put it there. We see it in Joshua 24 and 25 and 26. He put this pillar there, this monument. They made an oath under this tree, will always serve God, and people agreed to it. So here Abimelech is trying to win over Israel by going to this tree, accepting being a king, and saying, we're going to do what the Lord says. Well, that's what he says. But he didn't have any intention of doing that. But he wanted to come across that way. Wanted to bring, about a good reputation there before the people. So Ahimelech, he is king. Abimelech, he is king. Now Jotham, who is that one son that's alive, he hears about this. He knows it's not right. And in verse 7 of chapter 9, here's what he says. Now when they told Jotham, he went and stood on top of Mount Gerizim and lifted his voice and cried out and said to them, listen to me, you men of Shechem, that God may listen to you. So he's going to tell them, this is not right. And in doing so, they're not going to like it. But he's going to tell them that anyway. And he gives them a parable. Like in verse 8 and 9, he says there was this olive tree. All the trees came together. And they said, let's go get a king. Let's get this olive tree. But the olive tree refused. The olive tree said, if I do that, I can't give forth all this good olive oil. And the olive tree turned it down. I don't want to be your king. Well, these other trees, in verse 10 and 11, they go to the fig tree. And the fig tree turns it down. I don't want to be your king because if I'm your king, you won't get any of the good figs. Okay? Then they go to the, verse 12 and 13, they go to the vine, the grapevine. Let's make you king. And the grapevine turns it down. So if I do that, I can't make any of this wonderful wine that we have here. And then finally, in verse 14 and 15, they go to the bramble bush, which is a very large thorn bush. No use whatsoever, except maybe to use it for kindling. And sometimes they would break it up if they could and start fires with. But it was no use. And the tree said, will you be our king? And the old bramble tree there says, yeah, I'll even protect you. I'll keep you in my shade. But if you don't, he says, if you don't make me your king, I will destroy you. I'll bring about a fire and destroy all these other trees. Well, that does sound like a very good deal, but okay. And that's the way this parable goes. And in 16 and 17, that's where he tells them here, now therefore, if you have acted in truth and sincerity in making Abimelech king, if you have dwelt well with Jerubbaal and his house, and have done to him as he deserves, my father fought for you, risked his life, and delivered you out of the hand of Midian. So he tells them, you don't want this. If you think it's right, you go ahead and do it. And God will deal with you later. But Gideon is the one who fought for you. He's the one that delivered you. He's the one you should be looking at least from his household. Verses 18 and 19. He tells us what Jotham tells them here about this. You've risen up against his house. You killed all his sons. What you've done here. And that's not right. And he lets them know that, what they did. In verse 20, he says, But if not, let the fire come from Abimelech and devour the men of Shechem at Beth Millo, and let fire come from the men of Shechem and from Beth Millo and devour Abimelech. So he's given a choice here. You can turn this thing down. You don't have to make him king. But if you do, he's going to destroy you. He's talking to these old scoundrels here. He will destroy you, and at the same time, you will destroy him. How can that work? How can that happen? But Jotham here says that's what it's going to be. If you want to be destroyed, make him king. If you want to destroy him, make him king. Either way, that's the way it's going to work. Well, in verse 21, Jotham tells them this, and he runs. He said, they'll try to kill me. They probably think I'm doing this trying to be king. So he flees and he gets out. 22 and 23. About 3 years have passed since Abimelech's become king. And after Abimelech had reigned over Israel 3 years, God sent a spirit of ill will between Abimelech and the men of Shechem. And the men of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech. So those scoundrels he hired, they have turned on him. Things are not going so well. Abimelech has to be watching behind his back every minute of the day because these men are out to kill him. Don't know what he did to make them mad, but something happened. And they're mad at him, and we're going to kill him. Verse 25, here's what they try to do. And the men of Shechem set up men in ambush against him on the tops of the mountains. And they robbed all who passed by them along the way. It was told to Abimelech. So they set up these points of ambush. If Abimelech would travel to this place, they're ready to attack and kill him. And anybody that would walk through, they're ready to kill him, whoever, and rob him. But Abimelech gets word of it. Yeah, they're trying to kill me. So he's going to take some precautions here. Now in verse 26, we have a man by the name of Gal, a Gaul. His name is Gaul. It's Gaul. Now, Gaul, the son of Ebed, came with his brothers, went over to Shechem, and the men of Shechem put their confidence in him. So among these hoodlums, they're there. One rises to the top. He's going to be their leader. His name is Gaul. He's going to be the one that's going to take care of Abimelech. And in verse 27, Gaul here, he's all rejoicing now. He's the new leader. And he goes out and he gets all the grapes and wine and makes himself merry and he gets drunk. And while he's there with all his men, he makes a bold statement here. I'm going to get over Abimelech. They curse his name. I'll get him. And then I can be the leader of this group. I can be the king maybe. So he's making that comment there with the other men that's around him. Then in verse 28 and 29, there's a man there by the name of Zebul. Zebul is a friend of Abimelech. And he's sort of, you might call him the mayor of Shechem. Whenever Abimelech's not there, he sort of runs things. He's a friend. He doesn't like this Gaul feller, doesn't like him at all. And he hears about what Gaul is planning to do, what he's wanting to do. And so he's going to send somebody out to Abimelech and tell him, here's what he's trying to do. If you come back into the city, this Gaul feller, he's going to be waiting for you here and he's going to kill you. So he sends that warning out to Abimelech. 30 and 31, there's where Zebul there, he sends out a note to Abimelech and tell him what's going on and how they're fortifying the city. They're getting ready to kill him when he comes in. 32 and 33, here's what Zebul tells Abimelech to do. He says, during the night, you bring all your men to the city, it's Shechem, and you hide out here. And then first thing in the morning, whenever Gaul wakes up, he's going to come out to the gate and stretch and look and yawn and all that kind of stuff. That's when you want to attack him. when he's least expecting it. And that's what he is told here in verse 32 and 33. And that's what Abimelech's friend told him to do. Now in 34 and 35, there they are, Abimelech's men. They're out there waiting to get sunlight, waiting for Gaul to come to the gate. And when he does, that's when the attack is going to happen. In 34 and 35, he goes to the gate. Then 36 and 37. And when Gaul saw the people, he said to Zebul, "Look, people are coming down from the tops of the mountains." But Zebul said to him, "You see shadows of the mountains as if they were men." So Gaul spoke again and said, "See, people are coming down from the center of the land. And another company is coming from the diviner's terebinth tree." So he's seeing all these folks. Here they come. They're coming after him. And Zebul says, "You're seeing things." Well, Zebul knew what was going on. He's just trying to keep him there as long as he can, so he won't go and alert the other people of Shechem there, so they can prepare for fight. Now, verse 38, it's funny to hear what Zebul says to him. "Where indeed is your mouth now? Now when you were drunk there last night, you said, 'I'm going to do this to Abimelech, this and that.' What about now? You're scared. Well, how are you going to fight him now? Here he comes. Put your, watch your words. Let's see what you can do." 39 and 40. That's where the battle sort of begins. He does go and fight with them. And he's not too successful. And Abimelech sort of chases him back into the city. But Abimelech doesn't go into the city himself. He's going to chase them back in there, and they go back, and they're wounded, and they're hiding, and they're scared. Well, Abimelech goes back out, and he hides some more in the mountains or in the fields, wherever he's going to hide his men. And in 41 and 42, that's where Abimelech dwelt at Arumah, and Zebul drove out Gaul and his brothers. So that Zebul here, he gets some men together and drives Gaul out. "You're not going to hide here. We want you out. You're going to go out there and let Abimelech take care of you." Well, a bunch of them do go out, and they get out of the city. Not all of them, but a bunch of them do. And when they do, in verse 43, that's when Abimelech attacks again and kills a bunch of them, of these hoodlums and whoever they are that were supporting Gaul and others. So they kill a bunch of them. Well, some of them are still in the city, or they get back into the city. And in verse 45, Abimelech is destroying the city. He's tearing it down. He's going to make sure that these folks don't have anything to return to. And then in verse 46 and 47, and now when all the men of the tower of Shechem had heard that, they entered the stronghold of the temple of the god Berith. And it was told Abimelech that all the men of the tower of Shechem were gathered together. So those who are left in Shechem, they run to this tower and they're hiding. This is really a temple. So they're thinking our God will protect us. This pagan God they worship, He'll protect us. Yes, we trusted Him. We worship Him. He'll take care of us. So they're all in there. What's left? Verse 49, Abimelech cuts down some trees. He sort of puts them around this tower, and he sets these trees on fire and burns the tower down with 1,000 men and women inside. He just kills them. They can't get out. And they are destroyed. So he took care of his enemy here, pretty much. Gaul and all the men that were with him. Well, Abimelech's feeling pretty good. Boy, I got a big victory here. I destroyed this city. I destroyed all these enemies. I want to go to the next city. And I'll do the same thing for them. And that's what he does in 50 and 51. He went to Tebez. I'm going to destroy them. And it's pretty much the same thing. They got this tower inside the city. When he starts to attack, many of them run to this tower and they shut themselves up inside. And Abimelech is probably thinking, we'll do the same thing. So in verse 52 and 53, so Abimelech came as far as the tower and fought against it. And he drew near the tower, the door of the tower, to burn it with fire. But a certain woman dropped an upper millstone on Abimelech's head and crushed his skull. So Abimelech has a pretty hard head, but not that hard. This must have been a pretty strong woman. I don't know how big this, millstone was. She picked it up, over the edge it goes, and he's not dead yet. 54 and 55, but he called quickly to the young man, his armor bearer, and said to him, draw your sword and kill me, lest men say of me, a woman killed him. So his young man thrust him through, and he died. And when the men of Israel saw that Abimelech was dead, they departed, every man to his place. Then 56 and 57, this is what Jotham said. Remember when he's telling them, here's what's going to happen. Abimelech's going to kill you, and then you're going to kill Abimelech. Look what it says in 56 and 57. Thus God repaid the wickedness of Abimelech, which he had done to his father by killing his 70 brothers. And all the evil of the men of Shechem God returned on their own heads. And on them came the curse of Jotham, the son of Jerubbaal, or Gideon. So God uses Abimelech to destroy the enemy. And then God, in a sense, uses the enemy to destroy Abimelech. It took about 3 years to do this, but it happened. God took vengeance on both of them. They had no right to appoint a king. That was God's place. So they didn't need one anyway. But yet they wanted one, and it didn't work out so well. So that's the story of Gideon. We've covered the first part last week, and here we find what happens. His one remaining son. God uses him to tell them this is wrong, and they had a chance. They could have stopped and forgot about this king thing and turned things around. But they chose not to, and because of that, it cost Abimelech and many others of Shechem their lives because of this. Any comment on Gideon or his son or good old Abimelech or this woman? All right, next week we'll continue and look at another judge and see what he does to bring the people of Israel back around after they depart from them again.